Hello, friends, and welcome to this podcast. I'm going to talk about music. I'm pretty old, and I've been around music for a long, long time. In case you didn't know, um, I can remember bands when they first started. I can think back and remember when bands were not famous yet, and then when they became famous. And you know that phenomenon I'm talking about. I know you have that experience too, where you used to like them when they weren't popular, and then they got popular, and you felt like you had sort of lost them somehow. There's a shot in an old Beatles documentary where they interviewed one of the young girls who used to go see them at the clubs, the Cavern or whatever, and she's crying because they're going to America to be on the Ed Sullivan Show or something, and she's like, they used to be ours and now they belong to the whole world. And she felt like she had lost the Beatles, that they used to just belong to her and her friends. I think we all know that feeling. There's bands that we remember really feeling like we discovered them. It's like, you feel like you're the first kid on your block to have discovered this band. I kind of feel that way about a band that became a like mega superstar band. I bought their first album and I really, really liked their first album. I saw them play live and was just blown away by the show. It was so new and fresh, and it had this youthful energy, and I was at the time youthful and it spoke to me and it came right to me, and from this new place kind of inspired me, and made me kind of want to start my own band and gave me that feeling. And that band is U2. And this is their first album. And it was called Boy. And if you look at it like this, it looks like you could see the pictures normally. You have to look at it from the side. There's Bono and the Edge and the other guys. There's him and the bass player Adam. I really, really got into this album. I remember thinking it had a fresh new sound to it. It was, it was produced by Steve Lillywhite, who at the time was just producing every band that I loved. Something about his production enlarged a band. It made them sound epic. That he recorded it in a way that really gave like an organic acoustic natural feel to the drums. You really got a sense that you were hearing drums in a room. The style of echo, like when you're in a recording studio, a lot of times the type of amplifier you use for your guitar or the kind of microphone you use for the voice, it's all very important stuff, and different producers have different techniques that they always go to. One thing that's interesting about recording that maybe people, if you're a musician, but if you're not, you may not think about this kind of stuff. But the room that you record in has a lot to do with the way the music sounds or the way the instrument sounds. And there's a lot of people who learned how to play a guitar, learned how to sing and play while sitting in a room in their house that had a sound to it, like an echoey, reverberated sound that kind of made their guitar and their voice sound more expansive, bigger. Some people go and sit in the bathroom to record or to practice because of the tiles on the walls, very reflective to sound. So when you go in there, try it. Go in, if you have a tile bathroom, go in there and sing in the shower. That's why people sing in the shower, right? Because their voice sounds like Pavarotti, But I think there's certain producers who really experimented with that, with the idea of the materials used on the walls of rooms. Like, and you think of recordings that were made at famous studios like Abbey Road, they have rooms that are famous there. Like this room is a famous room where such and such was recorded. Some Lonely Hearts Club Band kind of a thing was recorded in here, and it has a certain sound. And when you hear somebody play a piano in that room, you go, oh, it sounds like the Beatles, And it's really interesting. And I think Steve Lillywhite gave that to this band. This is a very young band who had some really interesting songs, and he took them and made them sound epic. And I think they went a little bit too far with the epic vibe in their later career, because I think what I love most about this album, the first album, is the kind of childlike vibe that it has. I think I used the word youthful before. It has a very youthful sound to it. It sounds like guys who started a band and wrote songs about their lives at the time. You know, those doubts that young people have, those anxieties and the struggles and the suffering that young people feel like perhaps their lives are falling apart, you know, and sadness and loneliness and feelings of not quite fitting in and all those kind of things. I felt that from this album, even though it's not, 100% explicit in the lyrics. I felt that kind of feeling coming from the voice, from Bono, young Bono's voice. And the songs themselves, there was this echoey landscape sound to it. They're from Ireland, and I always liked that, it was like listening to, it's not, they're not from London or Liverpool, they're not from Los Angeles or New York, they're from Ireland, and it was interesting at the time. There were some, of course, some great, Thin Lizzy kind of bands around that we knew about, but being an Irish band wasn't as common in those days. And so it was interesting. It was like, okay, these are guys who grew up in a town that wasn't known as a giant music famous person town, like Los Angeles or something like that. They were kids who started a band, and you could really feel it on their first album. And I think that's what I love about this album. It was very heartfelt, very emotional, uplifting, kind of high pitched in that way. There was a breeze blowing off of this album that I felt like I just really loved. I loved this album. The melodies were interesting. They were unusual. Some of the melodic choices that Bono decided with his vocal melodies were really fascinating. The Edge, of course, with his sky saw guitar, is echoing, cosmic guitar tones that he developed were already pretty much here in some cases. The drumming and the bass playing are superb, of course, as they still are in this band. But something happened after this album. Their second album I liked as well, but I felt like I liked this one better. I wanted to go back to this one, and I felt like a little bit of the innocence, if that's a good word for it, a little bit of the innocence and the freshness and the youthfulness. Not sure if I like the word childlike, but there was a kind of a childlike naivete. I don't know, is that a good word to use for U2's first album? A kind of they weren't like a gritty, dark band that was trying to scare you with their rock and roll stance. They were these young kids who started a band, and they were writing these very earnest pop songs. But then after this album, they started sort of transforming into that sort of rock persona, that rock and roll band kind of thing. It looks like they started being styled somehow. And I remember when some of their later albums came out, a few albums later, they were sort of dressing up like cowboys or something, and they were starting to do these songs about American kind of things and Americana, and they were clearly fascinated with American song forms and music and American culture and American mythological culture and American musical culture. And I felt like I don't know, I think there's a lot of bands that already do that, and of course U2 had some good songs, but I think they were overplayed on the radio. How many times have you heard Sunday Bloody Sunday? And I don't really want to hear it ever again, I think. But for me, I kind of lost it for U2 after their first album. And I know that's sort of a, maybe that's an unpopular opinion. Maybe it's blasphemy, but I never got back into U2. I remember they kept coming out with more and more albums, and one of them showed up on my Apple product without me asking for it. You remember that? They've they've been insinuating themselves into my life for many years in various ways. Constant radio airplay, constant play on television, on everywhere you hear, you did more so than now. You heard their songs, and I felt like I'm so over U2 now. But and I didn't really want to go back and listen to their first album all that much. But in recent years, I've gone back to it. I kind of went back to it, and I listened to that first album, and I started listening, closely to it. I mean, I listened the hell out of it back when it came out, but I listened to it again all these years later, and all the history of U2 later, and I felt like this really is still a good album. It's a bit tainted now with what U2 became, in my opinion. I mean, some people still obviously very much love U2. They are like a rock and roll anthem band. They're huge. They're larger than life. But I liked them when they were smaller, I liked them when they were people rather than massive pop stars. And I guess that's unfair of me to, I'm not begrudging them their fame and massive popularity. I'm just saying that I sort of preferred them as a smaller entity, as a more intimate reveal of their emotions through the music, rather than these sweeping, epics of Americana and these worldwide pursuits that they have, that they put into their music now, where it's like this massive world encompassing thing that they do when they go on tour, and their tours are massive overpowering events. And when I saw them live, they were just some guys on the stage, and I was that close, and you were. I know, and I sound like that young girl in the in the Beatles documentary where she's crying because they got famous. It's like, nah, I don't begrudge them any of that. They are fantastic. They're mega stars now, Bono and the guys. They've done some really good work. I think they've done some great humanitarian things. They brought attention to some wonderful issues that need to have the attention brought. And I think they've been consistently important to their fans. And I appreciate that about them. I'm just sort of not into their music as much anymore. But I still go back and I listen to their first album, and I think it does that thing that good pop music should do. It takes you back somewhere. That first album takes me back to the time when it came out, and I bought it at the record bar in Tallahassee, Florida. I remember, and took it home and put it on my turntable. And this is actually the one that I bought, and listened to it. And I remember just getting going into that headphone zone and really getting into the production and the depth of the music and the emotional content of the music and the lyrics and the way the guitar flew over my head and the way the drums and the bass. It was a great experience to hear that album for the first time. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. My love for the first U2 album. And thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again soon.